Four, three, two, one, live.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Paul from Apex Mindset, and my Apex Inner Game is my other channel. This is the Apex Inner Game show where you will get an expert take with high level conversations on topics related to relationships, dating, sex, and inner game and mindset. That's a very long intro, and my new producer, Glenn Lawrence, will probably help me shorten that intro and sound cooler. So this is a first show we're trying using a new studio and using some stuff. And so there's going to be some working through that. I didn't do an announcement for this show, but if you're new to the channel or if you're just arriving and you can get through some of the stuff we're doing here in the beginning, um, this is a very good topic. This is actually a much awaited for topic for people who have been in the red pill space and for people who have been following just my stuff specifically. I've had many requests to talk about the topic of genuine desire and how do you know if a girl has genuine desire for you. And so that's going to be the topic today. We're going to be working through our new studio and programs. If you have questions, throw them in the chat. If you have do super chats or anything like that, it helps the algorithms. That'll help us pull out your question and make sure you get things answered. And this is going to be a regular show that we're going to do on a weekly basis. All right. But this topic, again, you're going to want to stick with me and work through some of the newness of getting used to the new studio here. And it's we're not gonna have a huge audience today because I didn't do an announcement. But if you're here and you made it, then that's badass, and I'm happy to see you. All right, and we're really gonna work through some stuff. So right now, what I'm actually gonna do is I'm going to, with you guys on the air, figure out how to copy this. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna go to my Instagram right now because I have a lot of people over there and doing an announcement. All right, so I'm going to do a post, do my story, and oh, so yeah, this is some of the hiccup stuff. But so there'll be some weird, awkward silences here as I figure this out. But I'm going to say go live now. Go live now with a big explanation point because a lot of people don't hear the announcements until they get it on Instagram or something like that. So we're going to do Instagram and Facebook right here. I got the link now. So cool. We are live now. Boom. And sending that over to my story on Instagram. And then, of course, my Twitter, you guys want to get on there and follow that because sometimes I do a lot of funny, stupid posts over there, but it can be a lot of fun. And it's actually a good up and coming platform considering let's see, live now on Twitter or yeah, Twitter, Genuine Desire. Genuine Desire Talk, boom. And then again, we're going to send the thumbnail over and now the thing. So next time there will be an announcement that'll happen this week for next week's show, and we'll continue doing that in the future. So now everybody knows about it. I've sent it to all of those who'd be on my platforms, and now we can just start talking. So good. So genuine desire. Here's the thing about it. All right. It's very difficult to talk about, although we talk about it all the time. And the reason why is the best way to describe this is an analogy. All right. Now, I'm not this big drug user or anything like that, of course, to give that a caveat right now for my analogy. And I don't use recreational drugs. And in fact, I don't even really drink anymore. I haven't had a drop of alcohol since September. But even before that, I was more of a casual drinker. I just choose not to partake very often. Sometimes I might, on special occasions, but to me, a special occasion is not every weekend, So that's just my personal choices. But if I've used psilocybin, okay, I've used mushrooms, all right, as a therapeutic measure, gone on like a hero's trip or a journey, okay, where it's meant for therapy for your mind. All right, we'll just describe it like that. Now, any of you guys who've ever used psilocybin, which is going to be a lot more people probably than have experienced genuine desire. All right. Which is why I'm using this example, but it's a good example. And even if you haven't used psilocybin before, you can understand or relate where my difficulty is in talking about this topic. If you've used psilocybin before, you've gone on like a mushroom trip or a journey, especially like a hero's trip where it's a large dose in a therapeutic setting and it's controlled and there's a direction to it in order to help out your mind and to increase your awareness, inner game, and make different neural connections, all that stuff. If you've done that, you can't describe it really well to someone who's never done it or never experienced it. I can talk about it. I can talk about what it felt like. I can talk about kind of what I was experiencing. And people who've never done it can get some sort of understanding about what it would be like, to take psilocybin in a therapeutic setting and go on this journey. And those who've used it recreationally might be able to relate a little bit, right? But you really don't know from an experience level or even you don't have that really deep level of understanding unless you've experienced it. And therein lies the difficulties. See, genuine desire is something that you experience from your partner or your other person. And until you've experienced it, you really don't know. And it's hard to explain, which is why, but I'm going to attempt to deduce this and explain this for you today. But that difficulty is why it's hard. And guys want a prescription. They want to know. Well, how do I know that my girlfriend, this girl I'm dating, whoever, how can I tell when a girl really has that genuine desire for me? But if you've never experienced it before, I'm now trying to explain something to you in a way that you can only understand to some degree, and you really won't get a full understanding until you go through that experience. Now, I'm not saying that everything needs to be experienced by any stretch. Certainly, I would never want to know what it's like to go through certain traumas or certain types of accidents or damages. You know what I'm saying? But, this is one of those things that guys want, but they can't put their finger on what it is. And they want an explanation. And then every attempt at explaining it will fall short, including my explanation today. If you've never experienced it, there's only a certain degree of, knowledge I can give you. And what has to happen is you have to actually experience this. And when you do, then you might know. So that's problem number one. Okay. Now, problem number two is ego protection. Ego protection is probably the biggest problem we have with this topic because there's not much ego protection in the psilocybin example. Most people aren't like feeling inadequate or feeling like that's something they have to experience necessarily who haven't experienced it, right? So if you've never done it, you don't care to, you're not usually sitting there going, oh man, like I really wish I understood this. I have to lie about this and lie to myself and say I've done it. I have to lie to myself and say I've had this experience when I haven't. Like that's not something that, you're going to do with something like psilocybin. But with genuine desire, it's something that men and women will do because they see it as a threat or a problem to their reproductive value if they've never had it or never experienced it. And so because it is an existential threat to your reproductive value, that's going to make you like want to believe you've had it. That's going to make you want to relate. And you may have not, right? And so you're unconsciously, to some degree, no matter what I do to explain it, You may be to a degree unconsciously incompetent about this. You may think you've had it. You may defend it, and say you've had it, and you really haven't. And that then lies a problem too. And the reason that's a problem is because I make we'll say, hypothesis or theory that for you to have a really high level, peak level relationship as a man, okay, particularly, but I'd say that goes probably both ways, but definitely as a man, for you to have that peak level relationship, you have to be your person has to have genuine desire for you. It has to be in what we would call genuine desire. That's going to supersede a lot of things, red flags, problems you're going to run into in the future, logistical problems, transactional problems, flaws she has, flaws you have. That's really what's going to hold things together and it give you any kind of longevity with the partner. Most relationships are not forever, okay, or even till the end of your life. But most people want lasting relationships. They don't want to make a commitment to somebody and design a relationship, whether that's monogamous or semi-monogamous or, a more or less sort of a harem structure, whatever it is. They don't want to put somebody in a commitment. As a man, you generally don't want to, unless your chick has genuine desire for you. Yet now we have all this problem with trying to illustrate what that actually means, right? Because it's an experience. And then not only that, it's a lot of ego protection around it. And that ego protection is something I notice and something that exists in the advice space when it comes to relationships. All of the people who show up on the internet, they don't want to show up and be like, I've never experienced this. But I know for a fact, as somebody who has, that a lot of these guys haven't. Guys who might even be my friends, guys who I even get along with in the internet space. Do you know what I mean? Guys who I think are doing good work, but they might not have experienced this genuine desire thing. All right. They might not. And so what happens is they have to ego protect. They have to try to come up with definitions and things for this. And you'll notice that they're just not, there's the difficulty of explaining it to people who've never had it. And then there's the difficulty of explaining it if you're somebody who's never experienced it. And what's worse is many of these people are probably not aware that they've never experienced it. That's just something, and they won't be aware unless they have that opportunity. It's been called, genuine desire has been called I've heard it called before, a container word, right? But the problem with container words, a lot of you saying the word container word, like saying love is a container word too, right? And by calling everything a container word that's difficult to explain, it tends to be a cop out, right? It tends to be a cap. And so I'm not going to just sit here and be like, well, it's a container word. And what does it mean to you? Right? Like that's not really that useful. And what that does is just calling a container word and then dismissing it. What it does is it really is kind of, again, an ego protection. It's like, it's either an ego protection because I've never experienced it. And so therefore I'm going to discredit it or discount it and be like, well, it's whatever it means to you, guy. You know what I mean? Or it's something I have experienced, but I have difficulty explaining to people who haven't experienced it. And so because of that difficulty, I'm just going to call it a container word and then say, I guess, whatever, man, just, don't worry, be happy, like that really stupid song they used to sing in the 80s or 90s or whenever that came out, and then just brush over it. That's not very useful or helpful for guys who are seeking peak relationships and peak experiences with women. And so the word container word is in fact a container word. Any word to a degree where the definition might be a little bit confusing can be a container word, right? Because that's what a container word is. It's a word that we all think we know the meaning to, but really everybody else has different meanings for what it is, right? And so most words are kind of like that. The reason why love is a container word is because what I think I mean by that might be different than another person. So we have to come up with some definitions for things. And genuine desire, to prevent it from being a container word, we want to sort of come up with some sort of idea or definition for what it actually is. So I'm going to attempt that with you guys today, right? And so I'm going to try to give a definition to it by explaining the experience of like when a girl is in genuine desire for you and what that's like for her and like what some of the signs are. And so, and what it is that you're going to notice, because that's the only real way to really describe it. You know what I mean? It'd be like if I said define a hero's trip on psilocybin. Well, there's not a clean definition for that. I have to give you a bunch of different descriptions of an experience now, and you have to kind of put your mind there and try to understand it as best as you can. And if you've experienced this before, you might relate and go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I've been there before. You just know I've been there before. And if you haven't, then it'll seem, some of the stuff might seem a little foreign to you. That's okay. It gives you an idea or a picture, though, of what it is you're trying to go for, what it is you're trying to achieve. Because the biggest thing a guy doesn't want to do is invest his future and his life into a woman and into a relationship that's subpar, right? That's like not a good relationship or a peak relationship. That's just sort of, because that's settling, and women definitely don't want to settle because of hypergamy, but guys will often settle. But most guys don't want to settle, and settling really sets you up for failure. It's one of these things. It's almost like an all or nothing situation. Like, you really want peak stuff to last for a long time and have a really, really good experience. It's like you have genuine desire in play in the relationship. But if you don't have it, it could last, but it's going to be lukewarm. It's going to be ups and down. It's going to be a settle. You know what I mean? I think guys are very, and rightfully so, nervous about having given away their life like that, given away their experiences and giving away their potential and possibility for something that's like average or, menial. Guys go through midlife crises and things like that because they turn around at like usually around age 40 or so, right? And they realize that they've traded in all their dreams and aspirations for a menial, safe and secure life that isn't that happy, isn't that great. And that's why they freak out. You know what I mean? And they have a tendency to want to branch off and maybe blow their life up in some cases. And so it's a threat. It's a threat to your existence. You want to have the best life you can. You only get one of them. And that means you want to have the best relationships you can. So the idea of I've settled in a relationship, but the girl doesn't really have the genuine desire for me, and I didn't notice it and didn't realize it, that's like a massive fear. Like, nobody wants to be 80 years old and find out that their chick didn't really love him or whatever that means, right? And so genuine desire. So what is it? Like, well, to come up with the best definition, I would say it is periods of intense feelings of attraction, desire, and love that your partner, and I say love meaning like attachment. When I say love, I'm talking about eros, the version of love that the Greeks call, where it's that passionate love. Having that through periods consistently and actually being addicted to that with your partner. And I say addicted in a healthy way. Like, I'm addicted to exercise, right? Like, I don't want to be sedentary. If I don't exercise for a while, I start to feel really bad. And I get a strong urge to get out and move, right? That's a healthy addiction. So I'm not talking about like a trauma bond here. Okay. Where that, I would say, mimics genuine desire, but isn't really a genuine desire situation, because you're clinging to somebody based on insecurities or deficiencies you have in your mind, right? And so you may get a lot of feelings of genuine desire in a trauma bond or hysteric bonding, for example, it's been called. But there's the downside of a lot of anxiety, hyper anxiety that goes with that. Fear of loss, drama, like stuff like
Paul,
that.
can you explain trauma bond?
Yeah. And so a trauma bond is like when you lose something and it creates this existential like a threat in your mind. Like you could, like, let's say you were abandoned by your parents or your mother or your father, right? And then you have this feeling of being abandoned, and it affects your self-worth. It affects your concept of yourself. And so then instead of recovering from that trauma of abandonment, you seek another person out in a relationship to bond with that person to try to soothe those feelings of, being worthless, those feelings of being unloved, those feelings of being anxious, and all those things. It's more of a soothing bad feelings inside of yourself, loneliness, things like that. That's what a trauma bond kind of looks like. And it could be abandonment. I just use that as an example. It could be abuse. It could be usually forms of abandonment, though, in some ways. Abuse is a form of abandonment, really. You know what I mean? And a breakup, from somebody you were really into could be a form of abandonment. Like, basically when you feel like, because we're social animals. So as social animals, we're designed to bond to other people. And if you feel like that bonding has been compromised somehow, that there's a message to your brain that says that you're not worthy of being bonded to. You're not worthy of someone wanting you and wanting to bond with you. That can cause an anxiousness and a clinginess and a need to try to override that. And so that clinginess, that anxiousness creates, they call them anxious attachment style oftentimes. Avoidance is where you're avoiding attachment altogether because you fear having a bond because that bond represents a threat, like a person will leave or abandon you anyway, right? A lot of times. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. There's a lot of different models and ways to look at this, but with anxious attachment, though, it's is one way, but it's like you have all these bad feelings and you're trying to soothe those bad feelings through this partner, and that gives you a lot of intense feelings and intense desire and intense sex, but it's based in something that's deficient inside of yourself. And what comes with that intensity is also a huge amount of anxiety. And then how you handle that anxiety, which is going to be dependent on a person's coping mechanisms. Some people will get abusive to handle the anxiety. Some people will get avoidant and stop putting effort in, right? Some people will get, that's, all you guys who are super alpha, you're usually just doing avoidant behaviors. You think you're being alpha, and it'll work for a period of time until it doesn't. That's the problem. It'll get a girl to chase you for a minute until she stops chasing you because she is tired of having to always, come after you and get no reward from that. And she'll lose her hope. And so there's a lot of bad things that happen, with that. And although it may feel like high, intense emotions, it's not, I wouldn't say it's truly genuine desire because it's based on a deficiency. Whereas genuine desire will be those intense emotions, but not based in deficiency and not having what comes with it, this high level of toxic anxiety that can be hard to control. You know what I mean? Or maybe a low level of anxiety because a person is avoidant, right? So it's like, or a mix of those two things where they oscillate back and forth, So their attachment style is like secure, all right? Meaning they feel this bond and it's high intensity, but without the downside. It's like a natural high versus a drug where you come down off it, boom, right? I use a lot of drug examples when I talk about love just because we're dealing with neurochemicals, and we're dealing with neurochemicals that are highly addictive, oxytocin and vasopressin, and the combinations of that create the love feelings, and add that to the dopamine of sexual desire, add that to the serotonin of the comfort you feel post orgasmic clarity, right? These are all very addictive combinations of neurochemicals, and drugs artificially play with your neurochemical system. And this is why there's a great amount of pain associated when you're not taking a drug, when you're addicted. You know what I mean? And so there's a great amount of pain associated when you're not getting that neurochemical feeling or need met from your partner that you associate with those feelings. And so I would say genuine desire is that high intensity of feelings, but without the downside. And for a woman, it's got to be a higher intensity than she's ever felt before. Why do I say that? Well, because of the theory of hypergamy. If you believe that hypergamy is true, which I ascribe to that, then you understand and know that she can't go backwards, right? She's never, if she doesn't have at least the same, if not higher level of intensity of feelings for you as she did for previous partners, or as she believes is her, the best that she can do there in that department, then she won't have that high, that, she won't have that strong need or draw to want to be with you. It'll be a negotiation then at that point. Rollo Tomasi calls it a transactional relationship. I'll reference him in the because he's written some good articles on genuine desire on this Rational Male blog. But again, he runs the same struggle that I'm going to run into here, which is describing something that you may or may not have experienced. You know what I mean? So you're kind of stuck giving examples and giving some sort of idea of a rule to follow or something like that, and maybe it's not exactly accurate or effective for your life circumstance. Who knows? But I would associate the best definition I can come up with for genuine desire is just having that she has that high intensity of emotion for you that she doesn't feel like she can replace with another person. Okay. And so that's that deep, high level desire. All right. And it starts with high level of attraction, and then it builds from there. And it's the high desire coupled with, and I say periods of high desire because it's important to recognize that somebody's not going to be peak desire constantly all the time. There's going to be ups and downs in any relationship, but she'll always be able to come back to that, provided that you're showing up and stimulating the same sort of responses that you did when you built that genuine desire to begin with. And that's the thing where guys will fail in their game is they'll stop courting, they'll stop gaming, they'll stop dating, they'll stop having the kind of sex they used to have. There's a lot of things that will happen that they stop doing. And what happens then is it no longer stimulates that high desire that they once did, because they're not putting in the effort and doing those things. And so it's this high peak sort of experience and feeling that she'll always revert back to more or less cyclically, not just with the ovulation cycle, but I mean, that is definitely a component, but just as you go through life, she'll always go back to that. There could be some downs. You guys could be at a low point in your relationship, but that desire is what's going to pull her back into the relationship. And your game is associated with that because the game part is stimulating those feelings of desire in the way that you once did and built with her, right? And then even in new ways, in a new and creative and innovative ways as well, where she goes, if she starts to feel those lower questioning, insecure, uncertain feelings about you and her thoughts and her desire for you, it's a short-lived experience, because then she comes back around and then finds herself in peak desire again for you, and it kind of keeps coming back. So genuine desire is something that is a peak thing, and it is a cyclical thing, and it keeps returning and reverting back to that, okay, over time. And whether you're there together for a year or whether you're together for 40 years, it'll continually cycle back into where she's in high desire for you. Not just, and that's in all categories, sexually as well as emotionally, right? And those feelings of intense sexual feelings, but also in feelings of security, comfort, and feeling like she can't have this level of comfort with anybody else. A girl who is not in full genuine desire will split those things. This is where, the alpha, bucks, beta, alpha lays, beta pays, right? Alpha fucks, beta bucks, whatever. I swear, I don't give a shit. But you get what I'm saying. that old trope, right? But that's a legitimate thing, and it's in evolutionary psychology they call it strategic pluralism. So it's not something that doesn't exist. And in absence of having a partner that supplies them with everything, they'll split their mating strategy. So that's where they'll go for someone that they sexually desire but maybe don't feel that much comfort with, and have the good sex with that guy, and then they'll settle with somebody who gives them a lot of comfort, and maybe they have good strong feelings of comfort with them but isn't as attracted to them. And so a lot of women get into a framework of I can't have everything. They don't even realize they're in that framework. And this is the thing that guys are fearful of, and you should be fearful of it, is that they'll settle with you because you're comfortable, but really their desires were with somebody else, and maybe with somebody else in the future because you're not that guy for them, right? And so genuine desire is these peak feelings, but in both of those categories, that what we could call the alpha and the beta categories. This is my personal feeling about it. Okay. So it's that strong sexual desire and need, as well as wanting that comfort need, all wrapped into one, cyclically happening over and over again throughout the cycle of relationship. And because it's cyclically happening over and over again in the relationship, it creates sort of an addiction. Again, a healthy one, not necessarily an unhealthy one, where in the case of like the trauma bonding and stuff like that, it's more of an unhealthy addiction, right? You're not trying to solve a deficiency inside of yourself. She's not trying to solve a deficiency inside of herself. She just finds this craving and need. So if you go through a period of time of not being in that high desired state, in that high comfort state, and it may oscillate between both of those things, within the same, relationship, or it could be both of those at once. It could be one then the other. It'll show up in different ways, and because of that, that's what makes it hard to define. But you know, she'll always want to come back to that. She'll have a strong desire to want to push it back to that. This gives her the motivation to solve problems with you. This is why she doesn't just cheat on you or dump you or leave the relationship or think it's hopeless. Even if she gets feelings of hopelessness in the relationship for whatever reason, or is concerned about her future or whatever that may be, she continues to revert back, because that that time away, and I mean away emotionally and away sexually, causes a deep need and a deep craving, and it's almost like a drug in a way, or an addiction, where she needs that to get that fix from you. All right. So genuine desire is addictive. Okay. And in a positive way, addictive. Okay. It can be a good thing. And it's cyclical, right? And it's consistently cyclical, and it's peak. Okay. So it's something she has not experienced with other people, and doesn't believe that she could or even wants to take that risk to try. You understand? So that's the best definition I can come up with for it in terms of definitions. Now we're going to talk about some ways of checking out. How do you know she's in that with you, right? And it's not going to be something immediate, although the attraction probably should be immediate. You know what I mean? That instant desire, attraction, and sexual desire probably should be pretty close to immediate. But it's even then, though, it's not always. All right. It can build over time. It's not, I tell guys in consults, it's not where you are, it's where you end up. I've had guys come to me, they're in marriages. They never had frame to begin with. The woman doesn't have genuine desire for the guy, but the potential was there. And with that potential and doing the right behaviors, she finds herself at a peak level with him, right? She finds herself developing that healthy addiction and at being in peak relationship with him. And so it can happen, even if it's harder. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot less likely, but in terms of probabilities, but it can be done. There's guys who've been in the friend zone who alter and change their approach and ways of communication and stimulating. The ingredients were always there, but the way he showed up and communicated in socially with this girl made her not want to be with him like that, right? But he shows up differently. He learns the right skills. And now she starts to find herself attracted. And then that attraction builds. And the next thing you know, a couple months after starting from an attraction point, even though he may have been friend zoned for a couple years, even he finds himself not only having sex with her, but for her having this peak feeling for him. And in fact, and not to give unrealistic hope for guys that are in the friend zone, because it'll cause you to screw it up. Because the way of getting out of it means kind of essentially almost breaking the friendship, but that's a whole nother discussion. But those types of relationships can be really long lasting because she already had the comfort. And then that it's only a few steps for her to have peak comfort. And then all of a sudden, though, the sexual desire and that craving and that wanting to mate with this dude, like at all cost, that part kicks in and then accelerates and exceeds through sexual experiences they're having beyond anything they've ever experienced. And this is also why other skill sets like being good in the bedroom, all right, having sexual skills, that's so important because that creates peak experiences for her, right? So there's attraction, just in a raw sense without, before sex even happens, but once you start having it, it instills that. And it's important to recognize too that girls will show up in different ways with this. And a lot of guys screw up or blow their relationships up because the girl isn't showing up in the relationship in the way that that guy perceives that she should show up if she had genuine desire. So in other words, she has genuine desire, but the way she's expressing it and showing up doesn't quite fit with this guy's mindset of how it should go. Instead of accepting his woman for who she is and how she's showing up, he's instead projecting what he wants her to be like or what he thinks she should be like based on whatever information he's developed up to that point. And that projection causes him to not recognize that she's in desire for him and to get in. Then he gets insecure and he gets angry or upset, even loses frame, and even in some cases loses the relationship. I'll get a great example of this. When guys come to me and they're like, she doesn't initiate sex as often. Initiating sex or not initiating sex does not mean genuine desire or not genuine desire. Necessarily, it depends on the woman. Some women are just not, they're not triggered behaviorally. They've not built up the behavioral, we'll say habit, but it's not so much habit, but they've not built up that in their behavior system to initiate sex. Very submissive women in the bedroom struggle with initiating sex. And then there's guys who've been with other women who were, after his D, like in the car, in the parking lot kind of stuff, like initiating all the time. And, and so he'll go, well, she doesn't desire me. But the reality is maybe she does. And there's other signs you're not seeing. But the way that she's wired is and her emotional and mental barriers and her imprint, her sexual imprints, because see, a girl starts with their sexual imprinting just like you do as a man when you're really young, right? And now we're in a era where dominant, more alpha type males is frowned upon, right? And so, and submissive women aren't showing up very often. So you're going to have a lot more strong, independent women running after the dick. And you get used to that maybe. And then maybe a submissive woman then who would have desire for you and is in genuine desire and has all the ingredients. And then you end up getting mad with her, angry with her, or discarding her because, she's not a turbo slut like your other flings and exes and your BPD girl you're with at one time and all that. That's where guys will screw up, right? As they misinterpret, because they're coming. This is where inner game is so damn important. All right. Because you're coming from a lack of awareness of your own sexual imprinting and your own sort of insecurities that you have. And I don't mean to say insecurities in the way that women use it, where they like shame men into things by using it, but just sort of deeper feelings of not being enough or being inadequate that have been instilled in you over time, maybe, you know what I mean? And it causes you to, and you're not aware of them, or maybe if you are aware, you haven't overcome them, and it causes you to show up and then start to blow up or critique your relationship and freak out and spurg out. And she doesn't really love me, and stuff. And it could be true. You could be right. You know what I mean? Or it could be wrong too. So misinterpreting these things is a thing too, right? It's a big thing. And so you don't want to do that. We got to be careful of that. Now, we have a sort of a working definition. So it's not as much of a container word as it can be. Okay. Now let's go through some things, some points, some signs. Here's the thing about it. It's not exactly comprehensive. I'm just going to give you some tools. It's difficult to come up with something comprehensive when it's something you have to experience. And I don't mean just your desire for her, but her desire for you. When you experience somebody who's really in that high, genuine desire with you, and it's both sexual and emotional, it's a whole different experience with women. You know what I mean? And you really won't settle for anything less than that once you get that. I mean, that's the only downfall of it, is that you are going to, it's a requirement now once you get that. And you'll understand it, but it's hard to explain, just like hard to explain things you haven't experienced in other senses, because it's a completely different sensory experience. And some of you guys have never experienced that. And I would argue, based on breakup statistics and based on a lot of things, is that most people haven't experienced. And the other difficulty is too, you'll find converging evidence, which means evidence and studies to point to ideas that we can then conclude from. But you're not going to have a direct data point or study for this. Why? Because do you think the researchers have experienced this too? Like, they haven't necessarily, right? And so you have researchers who are basically blind men in the dark trying to come up with ideas and things that would make a girl, want to be, and have that emotional peak in a relationship. They don't know what that looks like themselves. You know what I mean? It's not observable to them. That's the thing. In order to have data and science, you have to be able to observe it. You have to be able to observe the data, and it could be observable but it's in anecdotal cases, and it's in personal experiences. So like, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist though. It just means that it's difficult now to take researchers who don't know what that is, right, to then come up with a proper hypothesis and test method in order to see the data and understand it. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to do that, and it hasn't been done yet. So that's the other difficulty of it. But again, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just because data might be hard to quantify and observe, that doesn't mean it's not there. Okay, there's plenty of science disciplines that work with stuff that is difficult to observe, but we know it still exists. Okay, and so it kind of falls in that category. So with that, I'll go with, we can just sort of go with some of these numbers here. This is interesting in the studio because I got Glenn in the background, and I don't even know what my chat looks like. I don't even know if there's anybody on talking to me, Hey, Glenn, I'm going to just, we'll go past the fourth wall.
Your chat's looking good. Your chat's looking good.
The people in there? Okay, cool. Hi, guys. See, right now I can't see you unless Glenn pops some stuff up. But that's a part of it, though. I got to stay on point. And so, any good questions? So I'll ask Glenn. I don't know if he's on here or not. You can always pop in and say hi. Is there any good questions in the chat right now I should address, or you want me to go with my points?
We have one question. Well, I already asked you that one question, which was, what was genuine desire? Or
yeah.
And then
trauma bond, yeah.
Trauma bond, yes.
Yeah.
And then the other question is, are good looks enough to cause genuine desire?
No.
Care to elaborate?
Yes. So no, that's a great question. Good looks are not. Good looks are enough to stimulate part of genuine desire, which is that sexual attraction, that raw, she wants to bang this guy because he's hot thing, right? Same with status, right? Status is a marker of attraction. So a girl can have, have raw sexual attraction due to a status. Because what status is, and a way of looking at status is, it's the promise of, or like the social proof of having all of her hypergamous needs met, both sexually as well as transactionally and emotionally. Okay. And so that's kind of what status is high value guy that everybody knows and looks up to, and, looks cool and whatever, he's, and if he's attractive to physically on top of it, at least to enough of a degree, that status is the promise of that dude meeting all of these standards for her hypergamous brain. But it's the promise of it. It's not the actual delivery of it. And when this is why celebrity relationships fail so often, because the guy will have status and the hot girl will go, gosh, he's a high value dude. The promise of having all my needs met is there. But the problem is that I've talked about this in the previous other videos about celebrities, something called, I call it a status trap, which is the trap of being too good looking and having too much status, which is their SMV, and the appearance of their sexual market value is so high that they have a ton of opportunity with women, and they have high level of opportunities and women who will sign up for that just because of that promise. However, they don't have the game. The game is the skills in seduction, skills in sex, skills in communication and healthy communication, and skills in leadership, which all require inner game and having a sharpened mind. So their mind isn't as sharp as it should be because they haven't had to. We only do stuff when the world makes us, most of the time. When there's pain and when someone's going to make us do shit, then we do it. But we tend to not, or get laxed when there's no negative consequences, right? To not doing it. It's much more difficult to go for a goal for positive, results versus avoiding negative consequences, right? We will move our asses in a quickness to avoid negative consequences, where we're going to be maybe have motivation struggles and troubles for some distant goal off into the future. And so guys without status, maybe without, guys who look good enough, but maybe not super high in the good looking category, and that do well with women, they tended to develop that game part, that communication, the seduction skills and the sex skills, right? And so they end up having those skills. But dude, a guy who's like ultra good looking guy, top 1 to 5% in looks, let's say, and let's say he's got status, let's say he's a Hollywood guy or one of these things, they tend to be now lacking in those other skills because they never need to have them. They have sexual access all the time. And so the pain of not having sexual access that most of you guys experience was not a pain for them once they get to that point. And so what happens is then they fail in working on those other essential skills that would bring her into full desire or keep her there. Because it's the two things. She can start off with a high level of attraction and a high level of buy-in, but emotions are fleeting. You have to manage and keep somebody in that thing. And that's through, and her motivation to want to stay there is really high. It's not like you're trying to keep someone there who's determined to destroy it. Although a lot of women are determined to destroy it because they're dysfunctional. And that's where her capabilities play a role. The two things, I know I'm pivoting a lot to answer this question, but it's really important to understand. But, the two things that is a requirement, in my opinion, for a peak relationship is genuine desire, okay, by the definitions here I've given, as well as her being capable of maintaining and keeping a healthy relationship. So you have an element where some girls will be in genuine desire, but they're not capable. I've experienced that quite a few times. It's very unfortunate. It's tragic. In fact, when a girl, for example, has grown up such a certain way where she's not even aware, for example, of her destructive abilities in a relationship. Even telling her, about it, even working through her through the communication techniques that I've given for free on this channel, by the way, if you want to go look at those. Look at Luca, okay, is one of the acronyms I've used. Look at, anything revolving communication, conflict management, like those things. Some women are not capable of doing those things because they are just unaware and they refuse. Either they refuse, it's a will thing, or they have been conditioned so poorly through their past choices and behaviors, as well as maybe an upbringing, as well as things that have happened to them or whatever. That's the tragedy. And so when you guys get into with a woman that you really fall for, you have genuine desire for her, and then she has genuine desire for you, but she's, and I don't mean to use notch count as the only thing, because it's, but and to pull out that old trope, but notch count isn't just a number of bodies and penises she's stuck in her. Notch count represents behavior, a lifestyle, treating people like they're disposable, toxic patterns, being discarded, all of those things. So she has these patterns, and then she can't be capable now of being and maintaining a desire for you. She has a personality disorder. The desire in the first place was probably blocked from the disorder and was more of that anxious trauma bonding that she's doing in the beginning. And then that
another
looks
question for you.
Yeah.
So next question comes in and asks if any advice on how religious men can navigate relationships since plentiful experiences with women is not an option.
That's a really good one. And I've had guys in session with me who were I've had Christian men. I've had Jewish men, but they weren't so much concerned about not having sex before marriage. But I've had Christian men who are not going to have sex before marriage. I've had a lot of Muslim men who were looking to get married, to a good woman, what they define as good woman. That's a lovely container word there. And they want to have success, but they don't have sexual experiences. And usually the woman they're picking, though, doesn't either. That's the caveat there, right? And so here's the thing. It's very difficult for you to have that power and leadership when she's had 30 bodies behind her, let's say, which isn't even a high number by today's standards. So it's not a shaming number for me to say that. And then you don't because of your religious convictions. I'm not saying it's impossible, okay? But you just have to understand that when we're dealing with mating choices, there's right and wrong in a moral sense, and you have to decide what those are. But I want to look at it in terms of there's pros and cons. Okay. So every choice and decision you make, monogamy or not monogamy, marriage or not marriage, right? Religious foundation, not religious foundation. Like, I'm not going to tell you not to be in a religious union with your woman. That would be insane for me to say that. There's so many benefits of that, actually, a ton of benefits. All right. And it's, I know you're not doing it for the benefits. You're doing it because of a strong belief and conviction, which is better. Okay. Obviously. And that's the only way it can work, and that you would receive the benefits of a religious union is if you actually believe in what you're doing. That said, though, there are going to be challenges. There's pros and cons. And I say cons, I mean challenges. One of the challenges is, yes, you're not having a bunch of, sexual experiences with a bunch of women to be able to recognize a lot of these things. And so what you can do, though, is you can experience women, okay? And you can experience people, and you can observe relationships, and you can develop your skills. And because seduction is in the mind, all right? Seduction, to include the sexual part of it and the gratification, starts and ends right up here. And then it manifests itself in the physical body. I'm not discrediting or discounting sexual skill, meaning the actual physical mechanics of sex and how important that is. It is important, but it's actually not the most important. It's like the wheels on the car. You know what I mean? You still need the car and the engine and everything else. All right. The car's not going to move without wheels. The sexual experience isn't going to be good without having good sexual skills, but with your partner. And so you can develop good sexual skills within the context of a religious relationship with your partner. The risk, though, is that it's going to be post-marriage. And what I urge you to do though is to understand the difference between a marriage by the state and a marriage by the church. Okay. And if you're, or your mosque, okay, if you're, because this may be a Muslim guy. All
Covenantal
right.
marriage. Covenantal marriage.
Covenantal marriage. There. Yeah. So a marriage that's of covenant and a marriage by the state. A marriage by the state is a business contract between you and another person. Okay. Think of it like that.
Contractual versus covenantal, huge difference.
Huge difference, right? And our new format, I don't know if you guys can hear Glenn or not. It's okay if they can. That's good, because then I'm not just like, But anyway, but yeah, huge difference. And so you want to set up your business arrangement of the marriage, okay, as a way that protects you both with and don't do it in a state with absolute or a country where the laws are absolutely screwed. I just got word, for example, from a couple of my clients, now I've heard it in Japan, that, if you are married in Japan and there's divorce, you basically lose your kids and access to your kids. The woman has full access, the guy has none. That's a bad place to get married. Okay, so I know it's a tough decision, man, but unfortunately, the state and the governments belong, as the Bible kind of says, and I'm going to screw it up, so excuse me here, but leave what belongs to Caesar, right? And so what belongs to the state in your laws, that belongs to the state, and you got to navigate that accordingly and keep that separate from your covenantal marriage. And so that means doing a prenup is not against your covenantal marriage. Okay, having postnup, which means you review that agreement every couple of years with an attorney, that's part of the business agreement. And that is actually going to help you stay together, all right, versus go apart. I think there's a misconception in the religious community, and man, I would love to have a talk with thousands of people in churches and spread this message. Is that having a clear Glenn, you know the word, I forgot a word for it, but the business arrangement, having that clear agreement with the state, and in a way that what's that?
You're talking about the contractual?
Contractual, thank you. I just brain farted on contractual. And so having a clear contractual agreement and updating that and keeping that so that nobody's in that marriage feeling like they're trapped by the state. They're there because they feel like they're, to use a covenantal mindset, they're there because they are in a union with God and they believe they're supposed, they believe in each other. They believe in the marriage that they're in, and they want to be there. They're there voluntarily, right? This goes to free will and our concept of free will within the religious context. Okay. They believe that they're making a free choice to be there. And that doesn't just mean when they say, I do. That means the next year after the first year of marriage, which is always tough for most couples. That means 10 years later. That means when there's a disagreement. That means, right, that they want to be there, that nobody's keeping them there and keeping them trapped. They're not trapped by a house and assets and bank accounts and kids. That the contractual part and the breakup and what that looks like contractually is illustrated, so that nobody is then, because what if they think, if you get in a mindset and you won't be able to help it, okay, you're not special, and your girl definitely won't be able to help it. If she's in a mindset of, I feel like I'm trapped here, then she's going to protect herself first and not protect the relationship. That means if there's trouble, she's going to maybe conceal some of that from you. Maybe not.
What's between a contract and a covenantal marriage?
What's that?
The difference between a contract and a covenantal marriage is, in a contract, you are there. The contract's designed to protect you. You're thinking about yourself.
Right.
If it's a covenantal marriage, you're not thinking about yourself. You're thinking about them.
And the relationship,
yes.
that which you built together. And it's also it's in a spiritual or
Yes.
religious context, right?
It's more along the lines that your commitment with God or your higher power is more important than your commitment with the woman or man that you married.
Right. And that's a belief set, and somebody who takes on that belief and on that faith. This is the good thing about religious marriages, is that you have a more of a propensity of success and survival, I believe, because that's the identity or emotional buy-in that she might need. She needs an identity to get behind. In my year-long mastermind program, I talk about developing a relationship identity and having her ascribe to that identity so that that's a part of who she is. That's one of the things that keeps her in a state of genuine desire and keeps her coming back to that. I mean, it's like there's the emotional neurochemical addiction, but then there's also these other things that are set up that sets what the frame of the relationship. And that's one of them. Whether you're religious or not, she needs to have an identity that she is proud of, that she can get behind, where this relationship is a part of who she is, particularly for the woman. Why for the woman? Because as the man, you're supposed to be leading the relationship. And that's another thing. Most of your modern churches today say those words, but they don't actually show up with that mental framework. They actually end up putting the wife at the helm without realizing they're doing that. And if you want evidence of that, just go on any Twitter or anything like that and say something about the man leading, and then say something about equality not existing. All right. And then to a traditionally conservative, religious minded group.
Egalitarian relationship.
Yes.
Egalitarian.
Right. It's egalitarian and voluntary. She's voluntarily getting into that because she wants to be. And that's the way the structure is from the churches, or has been. But they've moved into more of this equality narrative in a lot of American westernized churches. And that's problematic in terms of that structure, in terms of male leadership, because equality doesn't mean equality. Equality means that you end up deferring to the woman as a leader of the relationship. Why is that? Because the women of Brafalt's law, that's why. So you can go look up Brafalt's law, but Brafalt's law, basically, she is the decider for mating. Okay, generally speaking, in a species, she decides that the mating thing. And so, although she's kind of the decider or whatever, because she has the eggs and holds the baby, all right, in order to actually, she's the decider, but what she's deciding is not only to mate, but then to be led and cared for by that dominant figure. If that guy's not in that spot and they're equal, well, with her being the decider, she ends up deciding, leading, and discarding. Okay, it's like a recipe for a breakup. And Christian churches, unknowingly, because they haven't looked at it in this way, they're being infiltrated by modern ideas, usually from sort of the feminist minded types, of equality and relationship equality. And what it's not equality, though. By attempting to have that, what it means is that the girl ends up in the leadership role every time because of Brafalt's law. And then it falls apart because she doesn't want to be in that role. And it's not even biblical. Muslim or Christian, it's none of those things. Okay. If you're coming from that. So anyway, I don't want to get too in the weeds on the religious stuff, but you selecting a mate and mate selection, it's going to be working on your game without the element of sex, and working on seduction, but up here. And there's not a lot of free YouTube videos that are going to guide you through that. And certainly the churches are not always great at that either. I'm sure there's individuals that I don't know about that might be good, but it's generally speaking, it's like sex is being that it's a private affair and something that's protected in marriages. Well, then it tends to be not presented in a public way to give you instructions on it, right? Through the churches. It's just one of those, again, pros and cons, consequences, rewards here, right? And so it's one of those little consequences. So what I can suggest for you is, honestly, is to get into a program that understands frame. Yes, I'm shamelessly plugging my mastermind program, but religious people need something like a mastermind program that I run more than anything, because we're removing the element of physical sex, and yet you still need to be able to choose and seduce her mind and select and recognize things like genuine desire, but with the removal of the act of sex. Is it possible? 100% possible. I've helped guys through this before, but is it common? It's not a common thing. So you're not going to have a model of this to look after. You can't just look at, I mean, you might, but it's going to be hard. You can't look at Pastor Bob and what he did with his wife. His relationship might be screwed up, even though he's a good pastor. So it's a definite challenge. And I recommend getting a separate set of skills on game and frame, and then developing your relationship with that. And you can do that around sexual fidelity. Okay, you can. It's difficult though. It's not an easy thing. But hey, it's your choice too, right? And there's pitfalls in there too, but that's a whole topic now. So we're going to go through some of the genuine desire signs. What you're looking for in a girl, though, in that case, is that she shows these signs and she wants to have the sexual union, but of course, the rules you both have says no. That's basically a short answer of that one. That's a very good question. I'll get into these talking points here, or else it's going to be a 12-hour show, and then I'll do some questions at the end. So number one thing I'm looking at, and this is in no particular order. I just, again, these are just, they're glimpses through the window of what it would be like to be in the situation, but you will know when you're in it. Okay. Here's some things you want to look for. One is that she's just going to want to be with you, and it's going to be against odds, not because it works in favor for her to be there. This may or may not be noticeable. Like, this is the challenge for high value guys. And this is why I think sometimes monk mode for too long is a stupid idea. This is why I think chasing excellence is important and your number one priority, but working on your relationships with women needs to be in your, in your daily, weekly, yearly, whatever. It needs to be something you're doing too. I wouldn't say chase excellence in your business or academics and never exercise. Be sedentary. Don't use your body. Just use, that would be crazy, right? Like, your body would fall apart in 5 years, and it would hinder very quickly your mind. See, inner game is important. It hinders your ability to chase excellence. For example, if you're not taking care of your body, because your mind starts to suffer. Well, our reproductive value and wanting our reproductive needs met is our number one thing as a species that we're trying to do in our mammalian brains. So if you're denying that for too long, it starts to mess with you up here. Next thing you know, you're on Twitter talking about suntanning your butthole and nofap. So don't do it. Okay. Don't do it. I'm not saying make women the thing that you are is your main focal point, but I'm saying it needs to be in your priority structure. Okay. It can't be ignored. The idea of I'm just going to be a high value man in 5 years and then the women will come flocking is not going to work for you. I've been in catastrophic situations, counseling guys through breakups, marriages, divorce, because they followed that exact structure. And this is without internet help. This was just what they were told, so these are guys that, they weren't the Chad in high school, and that's okay. They were smart. They got into a career. They made themselves top 1% in terms of their money. And then when they were in their 30s, or late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s, they then said, I'm now ready for a woman. Well, they didn't have any woman skills. And here's the problem with that. They had all of the, basically trinkets and things that make it an advantage for a girl to get with that guy transactionally, but none of the skills to recognize if she would love him, container word, or if she had this genuine desire for him. In other words, none of the skills to recognize, does this girl actually want him outside of the trinkets and the shiny objects, which is the transactional stuff, the ability to build a family, the house, the cars, the money, the stability. Does she have that desire, that strong, deep neurochemical desire for him outside of that? And if she doesn't, guess what you're entering into? A bad business deal. Okay, that's designed to break up after she's met her mating imperative, which is banging out a few kids. And you guys, 60% of men know what that looks like because they've gone through divorce. And that follows the exact framework and formula for most guys' divorces, is that they didn't recognize genuine desire. She gets in because he's a higher value guy, but his game is not good because he didn't spend any of that time really working on his abilities to seduce women and his abilities to communicate with women. That stuff you do in the dating and seduction and even in casual circumstances frames how you're going to be in a relationship with somebody. All right. It's not the same, but it sort of gives you a framework set of skills, recognizing, being attentive, empathetic, recognizing body language and tonality, foreseeing problems before they arise, proper communication and conflict management skills. All of these things are skills that if you don't have them, plus seduction to get her to that genuine desire point and those good, happy feelings, and to get her to keep coming back to that. If she doesn't have that, she's getting involved with you because you have all the trinkets. Where's that going to get you? Divorced. So it's a big danger. Don't do it. Okay, don't do it. You got to work on these skills. All right. So back to my number one point, which is that she'll want to be with you against all of the odds. All right. Now, if you have all of the transactional things, it's harder to recognize this now because the odds are it's better for her to be with you than not, isn't it? Like, right? She just snagged the good catch. So you're going to have to be able to recognize other signals then if you're already there. But, you know, if it's hard for her to be with you for some reason, like maybe it's going to require her to change her life around. Maybe it's going to require some sacrifice from her, but she still wants to do it. And it's not because the pros outweigh the cons transactionally, but it's because she just feels like she needs to be with you. It's the old saying, I think it's a Rollo Tomasi saying, because he's good at the sayings, is that she'll crawl over broken glass for you. I don't know if he made that one up or if it's somebody else, but that's a great one. All right. Is she really crawling over broken glass? Probably not, but like she's a girl who will wait for you when you go on that deployment, and she's waiting for you and she's not running through other dicks. You know what I'm saying? For military guys, she is the one, like when you run into that hardship or thing where it's not beneficial for her transactionally necessarily to be with you, or maybe at least it's a question in her mind. She still wants to work through it. She still wants to be there because her emotions tell her to. She has a neurochemical addiction because of peak experiences she's had where she wants to get back to that and do that. And you haven't artificially created it by being a narcissist or doing narcissistic behaviors, which would be the love bombing and stuff. Now, if you're an actual narcissist, I'm speaking on deaf ears here, but some of your guys, your pickup skills frames you to actually show up and do narcissistic behaviors as a strategy. And so you'll love bomb a girl to get her hooked in the beginning, and then you'll coast after that and maybe even devalue because you got things going on inside of you that in your inner game, okay, that's a little bit toxic, and some insecurities and some attachment issues you haven't addressed. And so now once you get the girl securely into, wanting to be with you, then you start damaging her and damaging yourself. And there's some of you guys who do that. And I recommend that you get my mindset course and that you start doing some self-work and maybe even therapy if you have a diagnosable thing, and that's you. All right. But that being said, though, we're not talking about you love bomb her and now you're shitting all over and she wants to stick around. That's more of a trauma bond. We're not talking about, she already has toxic bonding things and anxious attachment issues, and now she's like clinging to you in a trauma bond, right? Or, hysteric bonding. I so much dread, I don't want to lose you. Like those are fleeting things. Like hysteric bonding is when it's such a great fear of loss that she just clings to you, and then she's enthusiastically blowing you and giving you all the sex she can and doing everything she can to keep you in. And it's actually almost toxic because it's coming from a deep fear of losing you, that once she gets you again, then what'll happen with hysteric bonding is when she gets you again, then she is now resentful because she had to do all that and freak out and feel in complete turmoil on the inside just to get you back. And so you are like, wow, this girl's giving me great head every single morning. We're having great sex. She's doing everything for me, doing all the stuff, and she's crying every night because she doesn't want to lose me. This is great, right? Wrong, because then when she finally gets that comfort with you, then she resents you because for making her feel so hysterical. Not that you made her feel that way, but that's the perception. So it's not a good way to do this. Okay. So when I say that she wants to be with you against all odds, I'm not talking about hysteric bonding. I'm not talking about a toxic relationship and toxic or trauma bonding. I'm talking about, you know, she just can't imagine not being with you and not trying to make it work. And there are things, though, that are at odds with that she's willing to say, you know what? I don't care that that's not beneficial to me transactionally to stick around right now. I'm still going to fight for it. So that's in the length of a relationship, a very good sign that genuine desire is present. All right. And then the other thing is that she's not doing it from a position of negotiation, but we'll get into that in another point. In other words, she's not going like, well, I'm 50 and he's the best I can do. Like, that's not where it's at. It's a deep emotional thing. It's not a logical negotiation. Well, we have these barriers, but I don't think I'm going to do any better. So, that's transactional hypergamy. We're talking about even if she doesn't even think the thought of doing better. That thought isn't like even entering her mind. She is just so focused on making it work with you. All right. So that's number one, okay, that you would look at. So here's the number two thing that's a good thing to look at. Everything you do that requires effort that you put into her excites her, and she's appreciative and she's happy about it. Now, this assumes, though, that she's not an arrogant woman. This assumes that she is general gratitude and shows up with a general positive attitude about life and being gratitude. Remember, that falls in line with capability. Women who are arrogant, women who are entitled, women who don't have gratitude in their lives will struggle with this one. And their mental framework is to look at everything as a tit for tat. Those are the women that we might look at as being like users in a way, right? And so they're not going to have the capability of doing this, even if in their own way they feel the desire feelings. They're not capable of having what you want. But for those that are capable, though, this goes back to the whole love language thing and why I'm against that whole theory. Okay. Everything you do that you put effort into, she's excited, appreciative, and it turns her on and it puts her in a happy state. If you bring her flowers, she's excited about it. If you spend time with her, I'm going through the love languages. If you don't bring her flowers, she's excited about it. Okay. If you show up and spend time with her, she's excited. If you have physical touch and sex, she's excited. If she's, it's all of the things. For a guy that she desires, those 5 love languages, the answer is all of them become her love language when she's in genuine desire for you, which is why I think the love language thing is bullshit, because what it is actually a transactional negotiation. You know what I mean? Like, well, he cleaned the house, so I guess I'll have some sex with him because he likes physical touch and I like, acts of service. Well, if I clean the house or don't clean the house, she's excited. Now, I do have to do things and put effort in. Okay, so that's not to seem that you sit there and do nothing. Okay, but whatever it is I'm doing, you know what I mean? She's grateful, and it stimulates that excitement and that happiness, and it stimulates that desire, both either on a comfort or on a sexual side of it, right? And so that's what you'll notice. It's not well, he did this for me, but I guess I'll do this for him. There isn't that negotiation. And so it's that old saying, you can't negotiate attraction, you can't negotiate desire. There's the analogy of the Skittles man, right? The guy that just all the girls are wanting elaborate gifts, I think, on like Valentine's Day, and this guy gives her a pack of Skittles and she's happy and wants to bang his, suck his brains off because she's happy with a bag of Skittles. You see, it doesn't, not saying that only give your girl Skittles and whatever. People misinterpret that whole analogy of what happened there. The thing is he was attractive in general, and she had she had a level of genuine attractiveness to him, at least possible genuine desire, which means both comfort and attraction. And so she was appreciative of whatever he did. Whereas most guys on Valentine's Day feel like they have to earn this girl by outdoing themselves last year and all of this bullshit, because for her it's transactional. She's measuring and weighing all the time the benefits of sticking around with this guy. That's the difference. Okay. So that's number two, is everything you do for her will require some effort from you, excites her. All right. It puts her in that excitement. I mean, granted, if you guys had a big fight and she's questioning her whole life, and then you do something for her to try to make up, which I never recommend, by the way. Um, I never recommend that. But if that's what happened, that, and then she's still mad at you, like, okay, but that's a different thing. But in generally speaking, though, she's excited about your efforts, no matter what those efforts really are. Now, number three is she's addicted to being close to you, addicted to having sex with you. And without those things, literally, she'll go through withdrawals. Okay. And so there's the neurochemical addiction side of genuine desire. She's what our brains associate as a source for our neurochemical needs. Our mental associations are very, very powerful when it comes to neurochemicals. The story we tell ourselves essentially does make a difference for how we react neurochemically to our environment. And so she's associated with you with the dopamine reward of getting you to bang her, getting you to desire, getting you to do stuff for her. She feels good about that. She's addicted to that. She's addicted to the comfort of lying with you in that comfort sense and the serotonin, right? Just being close physically. She's addicted to the oxytocin feelings, the vasopressin, and all those things involve physical closeness. Now, granted, guys, there's going to be also sexual imprinting triggers and other things. Girls been through sexual trauma may have some different ways of expressing that closeness, and some things she needs to work through. Just for example, right? That might not be the same as somebody who hasn't been through that. So you have to look at this in a general sense. And this is why you cannot take women as a general rule and all that bullshit. When you're in a relationship, it's time to start looking at the person you're with. All right. We want to understand female nature, of course, but we need to understand how our woman we're dealing with demonstrates that female nature, how she shows up. And so when it comes to this addicted to closeness with you, some women are going to be more reserved. Some are going to be more touchy-feely or extroverted, but it's going to be there. And it's going to be there within the paradigm of what that woman is we'll say, comfortable with. And it's moldable. You're not molding yourself to her comfort level. You're programming her. If you're smart and you join my mastermind program, I say programming her as you're pushing her out of boundaries and comfort zones and making things that maybe weren't always comfortable to her now comfortable. You know what I mean? Over time and through pleasurable experiences and stuff like that, right? And so this is how, maybe she was used to only that. I get this all the time. She was only used to having an orgasm when she got on top. Why? Because she knew how to move herself in just a specific way, using her fingers and manipulation to make herself finally build up to an orgasm. But then she gets with you and you have sexual skills and you know how to make her feel out of control in a good way, and how to get her to get in the zone and lose herself in the sexual experience. Now she's all of a sudden having orgasms from multiple different positions and maybe without physical manipulation with her fingers or hands. Now there's a lot of steps to get there, and that requires sexual skills. Again, mastermind program. I knocked on my desk if you could hear, but that's things that we work on. And there's other courses and some people who are good, not a ton of people, but guys like, that have some courses out on that stuff. But the sexual skills will help you do that, help you get there. And, that's what creates those neurochemical reactions, right? So what I mean to say though is like, oh, so if she was only coming on top, well, that was her paradigm. Okay, now her paradigm is shifted, right? And she's, now coming in all different ways with you because of your skill and her desire for you, you see. And so when she has genuine desire, she can now push through boundaries and experiences and have more and more awesome peak experiences with you. And you want to do that throughout the life of a relationship. Once again, I don't care if it's 6 months of a relationship or 60 years. Okay. You're always creating those nuances and that variety for her. It's super important. And so we'll get into number 4. And actually, I'll pause on number 4. And you know what? We'll do this as a part 2 next week, just because we're getting at the hour and a half mark. And I want to open up for some questions before we close. But number 4, and my guy with the religious question, this may sound familiar to some things you may have heard. Okay, love is a choice. Love is a container word. Okay. I'll say that to start off with. Yeah, love in terms of a choose to like have an agape love, or a choose to have a storage, which is like family type love. Like those are all choices, but eros is not. In other words, love is a choice, okay, but attraction isn't. That's really important. Now, I say that because that's something that I've heard throughout the Christian, marriage retreat and stuff like that, communities, where they like to say love is a choice, love is a choice. Like it's tragic in the way that's used. It's not that it's not true. It's that it's an incomplete thought. Okay. Because what it does is it then puts the onus on this woman to choose to love her husband, despite the fact that the attraction is gone. And then she feels bad because she feels like to a woman, a love is an emotional experience, whether she wants to reason it out otherwise or not. A woman experiences love emotionally, and that includes sexual is an emotion. Okay. Desire is an emotion, is emotional. And so that's how she experiences her love is emotion for her. That's the reality she lives in. It's not a logical argument. And so although she can choose to care for, to use a different word other than love, like to be caring and to care for her partner, she can't negotiate desire. You see, the attraction isn't a choice, but these women unfortunately are left to feel bad. They feel bad because they don't have the attraction for their partners. And they feel like then something must be wrong with them. And sometimes there is something wrong with them, but a lot of times it's a two-way street, and there's something wrong with how the guy's showing up. It could be something was wrong with their mate choice, that she chose the safe comfort choice. Remember, strategic pluralism. She chose the beta bucks guy, hoping the attraction would develop, and it never did. That would be more her fault now at this point, right? And that's a tragedy then for the man. But it's not about pointing blame and making it someone's fault. I mean, that's something that we do in our divisive world of men and women nowadays. We're all in this together here. It's just about the simple fact that the attraction isn't there, and that is not a choice. That is a reaction. Attraction is and desire is something that occurs. And there's things that the guy can do to try to maximize the probability of that happening. And there's things that she can do to not put barriers in between her and her husband or her partner, to put things in between that desire. But those are all choices. Those behaviors are all choices. Okay. But the raw attraction isn't. And unfortunately, sometimes if the raw attraction was never there in the first place, a lot of times dissolving the relationship is the best answer. Otherwise, you're really just in a relationship with somebody you really care about, but you don't really love them. She doesn't really love you. And that's the biggest nightmare for a guy. That's the biggest threat for a dude, is to give up his life for this relationship and this woman, and she doesn't love him. And then no matter how much she tries to choose to love him, she doesn't have the eros, the attraction. And so that's my point number 4. Now is that, well, what about a genuine desire? She has this attraction for you, and it isn't a negotiation. It isn't something that she has to force herself to choose to do every day. She may force herself to have to like you. She may not like you. She may be annoyed with you. and your little habits are pissed off at you because you were an asshole the other day. She might not like you, but she finds herself having to be with you even though she doesn't like you because of the attraction. Okay. And that part isn't a choice. All right. And that's why it's just not a negotiation. She's not weighing out the cost or the benefits unless it's like unless she feels like it's a toxic relationship that she can't stay in. And sometimes it's toxic because of her, right? Her lack of capabilities, and that she feels like I can't do this. Sometimes genuine desire for a woman brings up toxic traits. I will get into that next week. But it brings up their toxic traits that they haven't resolved, and then they can't resolve them. And so that means they're not capable, even though they really desire this guy. And maybe this guy has a few toxic traits of his own, but either they work through them together or they don't. And sometimes a woman just can't do it. So there's times when she leaves a relationship, even though the genuine desire is there. And usually that's a problem with toxicity on one or the other. All right. But she's not weighing out her options and always going, well, it's a benefit for me to stay. All right. It's not a choice, right? That's the difference. Attraction is not a choice. Love may be a choice. You can choose to show up and care for somebody, to be a good person to somebody. That is a choice. When she's mad at you and on her period and she chooses not to be a raging bitch and yell at you and do some of the things she might feel like she wants to do because she doesn't like you in that moment. Yes, she has a choice to love you then, and that will help the relationship. That will help the attraction, her making that choice to love you. But it's not a choice for Eros. It's not a choice for the attraction. That's going to be in existence or not, and it's going to build or it won't. Okay. And so you'll find herself, again, this is kind of related to point number 1, against all odds, overcoming transactional objections versus the other way around. When she doesn't like you, but still wants to have sex with you, that is a good sign that there's some genuine desire there. When she doesn't like you at the moment, but cannot go too long without breaking down, having physical closeness with you, and then even if it's just sex and snuggle afterwards and crying, maybe because she's mad at you still, then she goes back to not liking you for a few days because you haven't resolved the conflict. That's a sign of genuine desire. Okay. And sometimes that can be done, negotiation transactionally, but the intensity of that and her net, it's not because she's not doing it out of dread, because that's the other thing too. She's not having a hysteric bonding moment and then going back to hating you and not liking you. It's because she just doesn't, she's almost ashamed of herself. She can't stay away from you when she doesn't like you. When I say doesn't like you, it means because you're maybe in a conflict or you told her no, right? Tell a girl no, and then you get to see what happens. And you should tell a girl no if the answer is no, of course. But yeah, so that's a sign, a really good one, is that she just feels like she's not trying to keep you. It's not a dread. It's just that she feels like this empty, this strong pull, and even against her other feelings, she has to be there. She can't go for that long. And then even if afterwards she's embarrassed or ashamed of herself sometimes because of it. Sometimes you'll hear a girl say things like, I hate how much I love you. That's a good sign of genuine desire. I hate how much I love you, right? Or you have no idea how much I love you, or you'll never understand. And like when she gets like almost upset about it, that's a good indicator. Okay. Because what she's saying is, I don't imagine myself being away from you. I'm bonded to you, and it's this addiction. It's this neurochemical thing. I don't feel like I'm control over it. And that scares the shit out of me. And when you're not behaving in a way that gives me enough comfort, it makes me act like a crazy person. So please stop acting, give me more comfort, because I feel like I'm going crazy. Those are the things that you'll see. All right. Those are good signs. And I have like 6 more I got listed, and probably some other things, but we're past the hour and a half mark. This is a fucking fire talk, by the way. I'm going to pat myself on the back. I don't know, man. Hopefully you guys like it. I think it's cool. If I was giving myself this talk, if I was listening to this talk, I would like it. So if you guys like it, definitely hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed, and go subscribe to Apex Inner Game. I'm not going to be putting as much content there, but it'll be high quality fire stuff. And I need to get to 1,000 over there for me to really start pushing content out over there. Got it, and there's going to be a different focus on Apex Inner Game, that channel. But this is the Apex Inner Game show, and I want to keep this going the way it's going. So I'll ask my good friend and producer Glenn, do we got any other relevant questions before we look to
we got
close
a few
off?
questions, Paul. We got a few questions. Fishman wants to know, why is Paul's book not out, but Bud Fudger's is?
Oh, I don't know who that is. That's a guy isn't that that's some dude who like spams the chats. Hey, I do got a message for my chat spammers. Look, man. There's a lot of guys that like to run up in the chats, and have these really sort of mildly, not to slam on my autistic friends. I love you, autistic people. I really do. But what appears to be a negatively autistic, socially unaware thing that you're doing in the chat, distracting with a lot of bull stuff. Look, we're having a higher level discussion here. That's what this channel is about. That's at least what this show is about. Maybe on Roll Zero, I'll dick around a little more. Maybe if I do an appearance on somebody else's show and the focus is a little different, we can dick around. If you want to dick around and you want to ship post, go ship post on my Twitter. All right. But this is a high level discussion. And instead of having those kinds of comments and bullshit, what I'm going to ask you to do is to participate in the high level discussion instead. I don't know who Butt Fudger is or his book, and that name is just absolutely ridiculous, right? Like, come on, right? Like, how old are we? 12? Maybe you are 12. Well, guess what, son? Okay, this shit can help you. And you're screwing yourself over by not helping yourself, right? So just hang out and have a good time and be fucking cool and be my friend. Don't be a dick. All right. If you're one of those chat spammers. So that's my answer to that fucking question. What else we got, Glenn? Open a book. I do have a book, by the way. I have a big, long ass book. Hopefully this year we'll get more to it. The reason why is because I have to scan through a lot of stuff, and I have a lot of work and projects, particularly my mastermind group. I got an inner game program that's going to roll out very soon, a very intense coaching program. So those are the reasons. It's just a matter of workload.
Yeah. So we got a question from Moa Saleh. Can you attract women if he is not talkative? Can someone attract women if he's not talkative?
Yes. 100%. But you have to be a good communicator. Being talkative isn't a good communicator necessarily, right? There are guys who talk a lot who are terrible communicators. This is something I gotta keep. I know I sound like a broken record, but this is where all this material is related to the question. I have course material in the mastermind program that talks about building your identity. So discovering who you are from an inner game perspective, and then building your game and seductive communication with women from that identity. So it goes from your identity to your archetypical, the experience of what other people see you as, right? Which is a little different than who you really are, because most people just compartmentalize and see you as they see you, but they don't know everything that's going on inside of you, right? And your experiences, they're not that close to you. So you got your identity, who you are, who you know yourself to be, which maybe is a less talkative guy. Then there's the archetype. Okay. I've ever heard of that cool and silent, strong silent type. Remember that old thing that women talked about before the internet? Strong silent type. That's an archetype. That's a type of guy that's very attractive to women. The strong silent type. All right. So that's not a talkative guy. Right. But it's a way he's showing up that's attractive, and there's a way he communicates with very few words that's seductive, and he does it through tonality, voice inflection, body language. I am more talkative here, and when we're talking like business or something like that, than I am socially. Socially, I'm very, very chilled. I'm a lot quieter, unless you get me on a topic, man. I'm asking more questions and listening 3 times more than I'm actually talking. So no, you don't have to be this, this false charisma guy. Now, some guys who are really talkative can channel that talkative energy into really good game too. There's challenges there though. A challenge with a talkative guy is that he suffers from an empathy problem sometimes, meaning he doesn't sense what the other person's thinking, feeling. unless he works on that, right? If he's just talking to talk. Whereas a guy like yourself is more observant, maybe. That by nature of you talking less, you probably observe more. That's going to help your game tremendously. And so we build from the identity to the archetype to playing the role of the person that she would want to sleep with and be with within your correct environment. So whether it's bar or meeting on in a park somewhere or running into somebody on the street or in a store, that's a particular environment, and you calibrate yourself socially to that environment, and you show up as the attractive version of yourself. That's what it boils down to, not the attractive version of someone else, which is why a lot of PUA stuff isn't so good, because people are just modeling the PUA, which will be great for some guys if provided the PUA is any good. Pickup artist is what that means. Yeah, okay, if your personality is like that person's, well, then that might work for you. But a lot of guys have different personalities. What they end up finding themselves doing is trying to make themselves more like that guy. Even in my pickup course, I don't do that. I want you to be more like yourself. You're strong, silent type. Okay, that's an archetype. That's who you are. Then you want to be like that guy, and your game can be very, very good. Fucking razor, in fact, but you have to know and learn how to do that. So that answers that question. We got anything else? Silent. I don't hear Glenn. Ooh, so we got.
Okay, here we go. You guys ready? What happens when you figure out her nature, and as soon as she realizes you have, she changes her nature?
We probably didn't figure out her nature then. What do you mean? And it depends on what you mean by nature. So this is
I'm thinking it's more along along the lines like once you observe the process, the process changes.
Yeah, right? There's that a little bit. Well, here's what happens too, is that sometimes guys get a false read, and that sometimes is because she presents a false baseline, right? So who she shows up as on the first date isn't necessarily her nature, right? Maybe who she is within the first 3 months, that's not necessarily her nature. And so this is why you give it time. That's the first thing. Because remember, who she is behind several layers of social barriers. There's who people perceive her as in general, and then there's who she is showing up in a particular environment, and then there's who she is in that environment with you. And we all know that the environment greatly, this is why, by the way, I have this model for game and pickup and stuff like that, because the environment, we know, greatly influences a person's identity. We learned this through the Stanford prison experiment, if you want to look that up. Okay, so the environment, and then the role that a person's playing in the environment with when you have somebody, it affects how they see themselves, which is why it's really important that we control our input, control our environment. Don't waste time on toxic social media or media stuff. That's something I have to remind myself of, because I have to do social media for business. And most of that stuff can be very, very toxic, and right. And it'll start to affect how you see yourself and pollute that. And remember, the environment, people in the environment are sending messages out that benefit themselves and not you. And so if they're executing that influence, you have to have frame. This is what frame is, at least frame in your own life, so that you can push through and not be influenced negatively by those covert negative influences. Because a lot of times they're not overt, they're very covert in how they poison your mind and how they shift you around, right? And so, in any sense, my point, getting back to the question though, is that she's a person who is being influenced by several layers of information before you get down to brass tacks who she is. And this is why you don't rush into commitments. This is why you stay flexible in your read. Listen, your brain is going to want to get an impression of somebody and make a generalization. The internet space does this shit all the time. Manosphere, red pill people will do this. And sometimes it's very useful to talk about concepts, right? All women are like that, whatever, right? And we use that to talk about concepts. But the reality is that nobody stays the same. Everybody is changing to some degree, whether they are controlling that change or not. And so you have to be flexible with how you see somebody. And sometimes the read you get or who they show up as isn't who they are in 6 months. And maybe isn't who they really are in their identity, but it's just how they manifested that identity in that environment. Okay. And so the key is to get in different environments, get in different contexts, get to know somebody at a deep level, have different levels of conversation with level 3 conversations, learn about someone's history and past, not just sexual, but in general. And not just to shame them for their mistakes, but to understand them. Okay, so these are really important so you don't end up there. Now, if you find yourself ending up there, then you have to shift your gears. Okay, when I talk about getting a read on somebody, this is even an immediate read. Like boom, I think this person's like, I looked at him, I got 2 minutes with this person. Here's what I think about them, right? I can build a pretty elaborate story, but I know that that elaborate story or read or that cold read probably is only 70% correct. Maybe. If I'm really, really, really good at body language, tonality, and recognizing the small cues in what they're saying and not saying, I can get like a decent read, but that read is only going to be 70% right. Maybe guys who aren't as good might only get 60% or whatever, right? But you only need, to be mostly right, even just a little bit mostly. All right. And even if you're totally wrong, it's not the end of the world, because the initial read is never stagnant. All right. I read somebody, but as I interact with them, let's say past the 2 minute mark, I've been with them for 10, that I naturally am fluid and I change my impressions based on what I learn about them. You see what I'm saying? So this is a major unplugging for you and just dealing with people in general. Don't have a stagnant way of looking at people. Your brain's going to do that for compartmentalization and because it's easy. This is why those first impressions are so important. But because you're a human being with a logical mind and with good inner game, probably not, but you're going to watch my stuff more and get better inner game. What you're going to do is not let those first impressions, frame every interaction you have with that person. Be flexible. All right. What tells me is that you were not flexible and recognizing and not empathetic, meaning not seeing her for who she was. And probably you are putting your fantasy into her of what you wanted her to be. And then she was probably reacting to some of that too, and then feeding you back, giving you feedback to confirm that fantasy because she wanted to be with you. But the reality was that wasn't who she was. And so being empathetic, asking good questions and having good experiences and not putting your bullshit in there, but instead backing off in a detached way. And I don't mean like completely detached emotionally, but just seeing things from a bigger perspective and observing and analyzing and looking at who this person is and how she is, regardless of how you want her to be. And so you made some major mistakes if you got to that point. But if you did, it's not completely like you can't resolve it. What you need to do then is just shift. You find out how she really is. And so now you ask yourself, what can I do about this? Am I okay with how she really is? Or do I need to change this? All right. And can she change? What can I change the framework? And if you can't change the framework because it's a capability problem, meaning she is this way and she will not and cannot change who she is, then you know that that's when the relationship's dissolved. And that's why relationships often don't last forever. And that's actually okay because you learn from those relationships that didn't work out to have better relationships afterwards. And that's the whole idea. You either are with the same person, having a great relationship and improving because of, the selection you made, or you are dissolving a relationship to have a better one in the future. Either way, the outcome is good for you. All right. So that answers that.
Next question. What is your opinion on your girl never initiating sex?
That's what we talked about that earlier. That is something that we would have to talk about in the context of a Zoom call in one of my groups. That is something we would talk about if you had taken my cheat proof course. That's something we would talk about there. Okay, in terms of boundaries and expectations, because my cheat proof course talks about that. It's closed now, you can't enroll, sorry. Mastermind program though, by the way, any mastermind candidates, just shoot me a message right now, private or otherwise. I removed my landing page to work on it and some stuff. I got to work on some things with that. I just haven't gotten around to it. But so I haven't officially opened it back up for members. But if you want to get in on that, let me know. It's a year-long program and we're in January, so it's a good time to get started. That said, though, all right, so we would look at your girl and we would look at her profile. We would look at something called 18 motivators, which is complex. So I don't even talk about it on YouTube. And we would get a good profile of your girl and see whether or not her lack of initiation is something about her and her sexual imprinting, or whether in her motivations, or whether that's something about her desire for you. And so this is why knowing a little bit about her past is important. See, guys on the surface just assume she initiates sex when she wants it, so therefore blah. But if there's a lot of other components that we can't get into in a simple question like that, and we're out of time too, so that's maybe another show. But like questions like, is she turning down you initiating? Is she giving you the cold shoulders? Is she always compliant? And compliant meaning wanting to have sex with you when you or having sex with you when you initiate. What's her experience during sex? Like, these are all questions we have to answer. Not initiating is only one data point. It's the strangest thing to me. It's a red pill thing, not necessarily a Rollo Tomasi thing or a Ryan Stone thing. Okay. But it's like in the red pill, we could say content creators or non-authors. We'll say non-authors or non-coaches or whatever you want to call it. Okay. Like in the red pill thing is like guys are like hyper sensitive about a girl not initiating sex. And I always found that strange. I never cared about that. And it never was a problem for me. Because sometimes they just initiate because it's who she is. A lot of times it has to do with who she is anyway. A girl in genuine desire is going to fall to her sexual triggers. Some girls have a mental paradigm that the guy needs to initiate, and she's nervous about initiating, and then maybe she sees the lack of initiation or whatever as her not being desired, maybe, and she's nervous about not being desired, but that doesn't mean she's not in genuine desire for the guy, and that doesn't mean she doesn't enjoy sex. You see what I mean? Like, there's other mental paradigms involved, and I think that it doesn't matter if you're having enthusiastic sex, but it may matter a little bit. It's a data point, but it's not the biggest thing I ever cared about, because normally it always boiled down to how the girl was sexually imprinted. But I can train a girl to initiate more if I want to. Usually I would. And that's in terms of SM play and making her beg for it, for example, and making her vocalize during the bedroom, making her ask for it, different things, playing sex, like little sexual psychology games, like, and stuff when we're not sexually together. And I don't mean toxic stuff. I mean, like, playful stuff. And in order to put her in a mental framework and recondition her to initiate more. I've done that plenty of times, so it was never an issue. It was just her thing. But then I've had girls who were initiating constantly all the time. You know what I mean? It was just like they were after it all the time. But the desire was not any different, from that one to the other one necessarily. When we're talking about genuine desire, all right, because not every girl who I've been with has been in genuine desire with me, but you know what I mean?
It only matters. It shouldn't matter whether or not she's initiating. It matters as long as she's showing you genuine desire each time you're having sex.
Well, yeah, and generally speaking, yeah, and then even not during sex, like, what are the other things she's doing to gravitate towards him in the relationship, And so just guys want easy formulas, because you guys need to not that the guy who asked this question is stupid. Okay, I know you're not stupid, but you wouldn't be here this long if you were dumb. But guys are unfortunately stupid in generally, the public out here, not you guys, not you good people in my chat, but like those other people, guys can be stupid. Okay, where we want to deduce things down to like what's step 1, 2, and 3? What's my formula? What's the one thing I can look at? Does she initiate sex or not? Well, she doesn't initiate enough. She probably doesn't desire me. She initiated in the beginning, but now she expects me to initiate all the time. So maybe she lost the attraction. You're focused, hyper focused on one data point. That's not logical. That's dumb. Okay. You got to look at the whole picture. Guys hyper focus on a data point like that, though, probably because of deep seated fears and anxieties. And that's an inner game thing. You can't stand in a neutral mindset to look at everything. And instead, things that are very surface level and easy to talk about, maybe on a YouTube or Reddit, forum, ends up being a thing to trigger you, and then that ends up being like this basic format, and you end up fucking yourself up. I talked about this earlier in this video about how guys screw themselves up in their relationships by that kind of thing. So don't do it. We got to look at your girl. We got to look at the whole picture. Maybe it's an issue, maybe it's not. If you just want her to initiate more, it's easy to train her to do that. Easy, even if she's completely introverted. It's not hard. Right. So, but you have to know how. It's one of those things. It's easy if you know, not easy if you don't. And that's more of, like I said, more of a conversation on a Zoom call with Mastermind or one of my other programs, maybe in the future. But we're at the 2 o'clock mark, and I'm gonna have to close.
All right. Well, we have 2 last questions. We can do rapid fire real quick.
Yeah.
So the last 2 questions are: what is love bombing? Fishman says, what is love bombing? I want to try it. And how does it work? And the last question is from Dukes of Hex, says, Paul, can good game alone get a chick that really doesn't like you?
Yeah. I'll start with the chick don't like you. If she doesn't like you, it depends. Here's the worst thing. The worst thing is you are a non-person to her. Not her not noticing you at all and having any emotion at all towards you is actually the anti of attraction. That is the opposite of attraction, is like completely ignore. Okay. So that's the worst place to be. That's the hardest place to get this girl to be interested, right? Is when she is a completely like non-interest. And this is why some like for pickup and stuff, there's indirect, associations and indirect approaches and indirect conversations that lead to more seductive ones in a lot of those cases, and you can move those along. But sometimes a girl just isn't attracted to you, and that's fucking way it is. So stop trying to jam a round peg in a square hole in that case. But there are other times where she don't like you. She don't like you as an emotion. And so not liking you is not a precursor to having sex with you, believe it or not. Not liking you is not doesn't have to be completely we could say a requirement for her having attraction. All right. There's a lot of times where girls will sleep with you and not like you. Okay. And so not liking you, it depends on what we mean by not like, and we'd have to get into that more, but at least that's an emotion. All right. And so if you can change that like around into attachment, and there's ways of moving up moving up the seduction matrix. Did a video on that, where she is basically in a not like state, which means she is tense and she is uncomfortable around you. And there's ways of moving that around into getting her into liking you a little bit better, at least, whatever, and then moving up the ladder into sexually open versus closed. Like, and so on the quadrant, picture on one end of the quadrant is high tense and low sexual interest, right? Or being sexually closed. And so that's why she don't like you. All right. But what you are able to do sometimes is you are able to move that needle over into the like part, not so much where it's friend zone, but a little bit. and then you're sort of maintaining some tension, but she doesn't hate you and she's unsure about you, and now you're occupying real estate in her mind. And then maybe as a circumstance where she does something, has to do something for you and have to be in an investment with you, boom, it sort of moves into now high desire, high tension, but sexual openness. And so high tension and sexually closed is not liking or thinking you're creepy. High tension and open means that she's high desire. So not liking can actually turn into desire. There's plenty of times that a girl didn't like me, and then she ended up having very enthusiastic sex with me. Now, that's a whole discussion beyond this, but you're asking if it's possible. Yeah, it's possible. You have to know how to game that. So now leading it to love bombing. Look it up on the internet, look it up on my channel for deeper explanations. It's generally associated with narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, and it's basically artificially getting someone attached to you by bombing them with love feelings. But it's the key of love bombing in those contexts is that it's artificial. All right, it's not based in your genuine desire for her, it's based in manipulation. So my suggestion to you is that you don't love bomb in terms of manipulation or deception. That you do it you do more of persuasion, right? Which is just you be attractive, you behave attractive, you treat her in a way that makes her feel attractive, and you can bomb her with good feelings when she is giving you the good feelings and when she is, as a reward for how she treats you. You can be all very much love this, love that with your partner, right? You can be very, very, into that stuff when you're in a position of authority, meaning she sees you as that leader and she sees you as her best, preferably, or at least a man worth respecting. Okay, so she sees you as an authority in the relationship, and you're not trying to earn her love through compliments and kind words and love feelings and things and whatever, but you're just doing that as a product of her love. In other words, as a result of the genuine desire that she has for you, you're doing those things, and as a result of your desire versus doing it as a way to earn it. We'll get into that actually more next week because this has just turned into a 2-part series, because that's an important thing about the difference between earning somebody's desire versus having what you do for them and the experiences you're doing, the things you're doing for them as a product of the desire. The difference between earning and then doing it as a product. We'll talk about that next week. But with that, I actually have to close. So no more closing statements other than thanks for sticking around this long. See you guys next week at noon Tuesday.